The learning of English in the contemporary China is often mistaken for a purely technical undertaking, a neutral means of communication, a pragmatic skill for career advancement, a tool for global navigation. Yet, when situated within the relational and dispositional framework offered by sociologist Pierre Bourdieu in The Logic of Practice, it becomes evident that English learning is not merely a pedagogical activity. It is a deeply embodied struggle within structured fields, a slow and uneven conversion of linguistic capital, and a site where symbolic power is enacted, resisted, and naturalized. With 14 years of experience in teaching and academic administration, and having served both as a contestant and adjudicator in various national English speech contests in China, I have witnessed firsthand the subtle drama of recognition and misrecognition that unfolds in these arenas. I have seen students deliver arguments of striking originality and intellectual maturity, only to be dismissed, subtly but surely, because of the foreignness in their own English. Their ideas are often eclipsed by their intonation, their conviction undone by a misplaced stress, their fluency undermined by a local cadence. To be clear, no Chinese judge will ever declare this bias aloud. The scoring rubrics officially reference content, delivery, and fluency. But beneath all these seemingly neutral criteria lies an unspoken standard. The closer your accent is to that of a native speaker, the more legitimate your speech is perceived to be. In practice, the competition shifts from the contest of ideas to a contest of imitation. A speech contest becomes, quite literally, an accent contest. Ironically, this emphasis on accent is more pronounced among Chinese judges than among foreign judges, who, more often than not, pay far greater attention to structure, logic, and originality than to phonetic precision. What unfolds here is what Bourdieu calls symbolic violence, a form of domination that is gentle, invisible, and internalized. Students begin to discipline themselves. They rehearse the clipped tones of BBC English, imitate the rhetorical polish of Ivy League-trained American politicians. They grow uneasy with the sound of their own voice. They no longer ask, "What do I want to say?" but instead, "How should I sound?" in order to be taken seriously. To learn English in such contexts is not to acquire a neutral code. It is to enter a structured market of symbolic goods where language, accent, and presentation are stratified. As Bourdieu reminds us, language is not simply a system of signs. It is a system of social distinctions. It marks out speakers not only by what they say, but by how they say it and to whom they are granted the right to speak. In China and across the post-colonial world, English operates as a form of linguistic capital, convertible in global academic, economic, and cultural fields. The child who speaks English well is perceived as globally minded, modern, employable. But not all Englishes are equal. The child of diplomats in Beijing, raised on Netflix and international schools, steps into the speech contests with confidence and near-native rhythm. The rural student from Sichuan, whose only exposure to English is the classroom and rote instruction, enters the same contest with equal grammar but a different accent, and is heard differently. The field, under the guise of fairness, silently rewards those whose social background has already tuned them to its frequency. Accent here is not an aesthetic detail. It functions as a currency. A standard accent grants authority, even an error. A Chinese accented English, even when grammatically precise and rhetorically elegant, is often received with polite condescension. The asymmetry lies not in the skill itself, but in the social value assigned to the form of that skill. To speak of English learning is to speak of habitus in motion. It is not a purely cognitive task of memorizing grammar rules or acquiring vocabulary. It is a slow and embodied transformation. The learner must retrain the tongue, reframe the temporal and causal reasoning, recalibrate the sense of humor, indirectness, disagreement, and even apology. English is not only a foreign language, it is a foreign way of being in the world. This transformation creates what Bourdieu describes as a cleft habitus, a condition of dispositional dislocation. The learner finds themselves caught between two linguistic worlds. The first language shapes the instincts and cultural sensitivities, but the field they aspire to enter, the global Anglophone field, demands different postures of speech and self. Fluency, in this sense, is not only linguistic mastery, it is a feel for the game. Bourdieu uses the phrase to describe practical mastery, not rule following, but embodied responsiveness. One does not speak English by memorizing. One speaks by acquiring its rhythm, its pragmatics, its performative cues. This feel cannot be taught through drills. It is cultivated through social immersion, repetition, and risk, especially the risk of sounding strange, wrong, or unfinished. Thus, when students struggle with fluency, they are not failing. They are undergoing the deep reconfiguration of their linguistic habitus. They are in the middle of a struggle between structural fields and personal dispositions, a struggle often masked as a lack of confidence or improper tone. Perhaps the greatest irony emerges not in the classroom, but after students go abroad. Many who studied under the anxious gaze of accent correctness in China find themselves suddenly disoriented when they arrive in English-speaking countries. In American or British graduate seminars, they discover that native speakers themselves speak with great variation, from Texas drawls to Glasgow lilt, from fast-talking New Yorkers to relaxed Californians. English is plural, fragmented, and localized. Even more surprising, international students from Colombia, Germany, Japan, or Ghana speak freely in their own accent with unpolished grammar, yet with remarkable clarity and confidence. Professors respond not to their intonation, but to the structure of the thought. Their argument is what matters, not how many phonemes match the Queen's English. This realization is first puzzling, then liberating. It reveals the constructed nature of linguistic legitimacy. It shows that the anxiety about accent, so deeply internalized by Chinese learners, is not an objective truth, but the product of a specific cultural field shaped by internalized coloniality and overcorrection. Bourdieu would call this overadjustment, where the dominated class enforces the norms of the dominant even more strictly than the dominant themselves. In China, English teachers, coaches, and judges, often themselves non-native speakers, become the fiercest enforcers of a norm that native speakers themselves treat with relaxed pluralism. What then must the teacher do? First, we must recognize that English learning is not innocent, particularly in China. It is a social and symbolic terrain where power is reproduced. We're not just teaching language, we're shaping perceptions of self-worth, legitimacy, and intellectual voice. Second, we must embrace a pedagogy of practice. Grammar and vocabulary are necessary, but insufficient. Learners must be immersed in varied Englishes, exposed to real-life communication, and invited into the game of English. They must learn to speak through the language, not about it. And they must be allowed to falter without shame. Third, we must actively decolonize our standards. We must interrogate whose English we uphold and why. We must resist the silent tyranny of the native accent and affirm instead the multiplicity of Englishes. To speak English with a Chinese accent is not to be deficient. It is to speak from the place of rootedness, a bridge between worlds. As teachers, we must stop mistaking polish for power and begin listening for voice. To learn English is not merely to acquire a skill, it is to position oneself within a symbolic field, to take a stance in the global economy of voice. It is to speak not only across boundaries, but sometimes against them. Yet it is also a space of potential freedom. In stammered phrases, in accident speech, in unconventional cadence, there emerges not failure, but formation. The student who speaks haltingly may, in time, say what no polished speaker dares to say. That, too, is a form of symbolic power. Language is never innocent, but neither is it closed. And practice, slow, reflective, dispositional, is not only the key to fluency, it is the path to agency. Let us teach not to erase difference, but to speak through it and beyond it.